Hi everybody. Today we're going to talk about random numbers in JavaScript. I've decided to pull that out of the other presentation and put it into its own. So this one I'm going to let you watch this video on your own. It really brings up the question of what is randomness and what do we mean by it, and can anything actually be random? Part of the idea it gets at is that randomness, what we really mean by that is the idea that something can't be predicted. The trouble, of course, is we get better and better at predicting things all the time. Random.org. This is a website that does a lot of cool stuff with randomness. It's got great tools for getting random lists and random numbers and all kinds of great things. And it talks a little bit about what they do to try to achieve true randomness. And one of the things you'll note is the randomness that they do comes from atmospheric noise. Like literally they've got microphones that are picking up sound, and they're using that to help them achieve randomness. Check that website out. It's really interesting. Okay, so we want to create random numbers in JavaScript, and we use this math.random function call. Now we've talked in class about how JavaScript variables should not start with a capital letter. Here we've got this math that is started with a capital letter, and this is the first real object that we've dug into. So the reason why we don't make variables start with capital letters is because we reserve that for objects. Objects are a collection of properties and methods and batches of code that sort of work together to achieve a grouping of functions that are related. In this case, there are a bunch of math functions and some math values like pi that belong together. So there's this math object available in JavaScript, and one of its methods is random. So I want you to try this out. Write a page that runs this. Alert math.random. Reload it 10 times and see what you get. I'll wait for a second so you can pause the video and try it out. Okay, now that you're back, I will hop on over to Visual Studio Code and try it out myself. Okay, here I am. I want to alert math.random. I'm going to save that. And over in Chrome, I've got my JavaScript test page. I'm going to reload it, and I get 0.65403. Okay, I'm going to reload it again, 0.270, 0.009. You probably got, though very different results, a very similar pattern, and that is that it returns a number between 0 and 1. And you probably never actually got 1. That's important. It's not very useful. You don't sit in a playground and say, hey, I'm thinking of a number between 0 and 1. Can you guess it? But we can make it useful. What we want to do is first get the random number, multiply it by the range of numbers we want. So it's 1 and 100. 100 minus 1 is 99, right? We get rid of the decimals. There will be some left. So we just chop them off. And then we add the lowest number that you want. 1 to 100, we're going to add 1. 0 to 100, we're going to add 0. Here's what that looks like. To get a number between 5 and 10, a really nice, clear possibility, we get the random number with the math.random. We multiply by a range. That's 10 minus 5, so our range is 5. We drop those decimals with this math.floor function. And that's another part of that math object. And what the floor does is it takes whatever the decimal is, 8.923, just chops off the decimals, and you end up with 8. Notice that I brought this right parenthesis over. That's super valuable. And then we want to add a minimum. Our minimum is 5. So let's think about that for a second. If we do the math.random and we get 0, what's our result? 0 times 5 is 0. We take off the decimals, so we have 0, and we add 5, so we get 5. If we get 1, we're not quite going to get 1. This is where we run into a problem, but we'll answer that in a little bit. Math.random, we get 1 times 5 is 5. Get rid of the decimals, and then we add 5, and we now have 10. Okay, so we've got a theoretical range in there that makes sense. Since we can't actually get all the way up to 1, then we end up with 0.9 something, right? 0.9 something times 5 brings us up to probably some very high value of 4 plus 5 is 9. So we get 5 to 9 for that. We'll talk about the fact that this is exclusive of that top number in a little bit. Or we can do it with variables. So instead of hard coding the numbers into this line of code, we set up two variables, the min and the max, call them whatever makes sense for what you're doing, 5 to 10, and then we just plug those in. Min becomes here and here, so 5 gets put in there and 5 gets put in there, and that 10 goes into the max. So it ends up being the same thing. This will be especially valuable when we start doing functions a little later in the course. Notice, like we talked about before, that top number is exclusive. Using a minimum of 1 and a max of 100, it would only go up to 99. So it depends on what you mean. If you want to include that top number, you just got to add 1 to the range. So it looks like this. Add the +1 right after the min, and we're all good. All right, so I want you to try it. Write a page that uses alert to display a random number between 1 and 20. Reload it 10 times and see what you get. And you can decide if you want it to be inclusive or exclusive of the actual number 20. Okay, I'll wait for a second so you can pause the video. Welcome back. All right, let's hop on over into Visual Studio Code and give this thing a shot. So instead of alerting math.random, we want to, I'm going to go ahead and do this with variables. I'm going to say the min is 1, the max is 20. I'm going to alert math.random, so we take that random number, we multiply the range, max minus the min, we take the floor of that, we remember to put in our closing parenthesis, and then we add the minimum, okay? Then we have to decide if we want that to be inclusive. I think if I'm playing a game with somebody and I say pick a number between 1 and 20, they might pick 20. So I'm going to go ahead and add that 1 into my range. So I don't need that page at all. I'm going to go back into our test and I'm going to reload it and I get 7. I reload it and I get 5. I reload it and I get 9. Let's see if we can get something above 10 here. There's an 18. And there's a 12. So we see that we're at least working somewhere in the range. One of the challenges of testing random numbers is that it's really hard to see if you're really getting everything, right? So there we have it. You're now able to generate a random number, control the bottom and the top of that. So we've got it within a range. You're able to use variables to control that, and you're able to decide if that variable or if that random range is going to include that top number or not. And that's the goal for today.